Good afternoon. How are you, Richard?
Afternoon, I'm good. How are you?
Great, thanks. I tell you what, I was struggling there. I couldn't remember how to use half the things here. It's like because I've been away for a while.
Not been away that long.
Oh, I feel like I've been away for an eternity. It's like, oh my goodness. I just feel like I've been away for an eternity, and I've been learning, I've been growing, I've been developing, I've been, you know some of the posts that's been happening anyway.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to be back. It's exciting to be on the show and actually start talking about, wealth creation. That's what it comes down to. Good afternoon, Anne-Marie. Feel free to chip in and ask any questions. Today, I tell you what though, I'll be honest. If you've got a happy, contented life, for God's sake, don't listen to this show. Because by the time we're finished with you, you'll be thinking, wait a minute, I've got a raw deal here. I should be getting more out of life. So just be careful. It comes with a warning. It's all about urban myths today. We're going to be talking about urban myths. People saying all these things that you think, wait a minute. That whole thing is just designed to hold you back. It's designed to keep you back in society, keep you in your lane and keep you where you are. As far as I'm concerned, that's what it's designed to do. Richard, what's your thoughts on urban myths and all the rest of it? Do you think that's what it is?
I think there's a lot of things that you get told and pick up on when you're younger and things are kind of ingrained in you, and you tend to grow up believing that that's the way they should be, and really they're not.
Don't know any different, do you? It's the whole thing about. We'll talk about that in a minute anyway. Because we'll have a good moan about this. It's like it's one of my passions. It's like how our mindset and this 6 inches between our ears is what controls everything that happens to us and everything that will happen to us in the future and everything that's happened to us in the past. So you are where you are because of the decisions you've made and the decisions you've failed to make. So if you're not happy where you are, guess whose fault it is? Me. Well, it's not my fault for you.
I know. I think like a lot of people are so quick to blame others for things, and really, I mean, you need to take responsibility when things aren't going right. You can't blame everybody else but yourself.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Andrea, and good afternoon, Aaron. Chip in if you want.
Afternoon, guys.
Hear what you've got to say and what you're thinking about this in terms of urban myths. We're going to be talking about portfolios as well. I've got a couple of portfolios around about 4 million, one at 4 million, one at 2 million, and I've got a smaller one in the Fife area around about the 265,000 level. So we're going to talk about these portfolios as well, and does it make sense? And they are available to buy right now. So this is part of our wealth creation, wealth building program. We've got portfolios, 40 properties in Aberdeen. We've got 18 properties in the Nairn area just outside Aberdeen, and we've got 4 properties in the Fife area to talk about. Hopefully we'll get round to it. I mean, we might end up running out of time. What's in the news so far, Richard? What's happening in the news? What do we need to know as investors, as landlords, as property people, even as letting agents? I've got a funny feeling some letting agents actually probably watch this.
I think the most important thing in obviously recent weeks is the change, obviously, in notice periods for the private residential tenancy and things. Obviously, we've had the impact of the Coronavirus Act for such a long time now. Has caused quite a few issues, not predominantly for us as such. We've had 1 or 2, but for a lot of people, I've had them coming to me with the issue with notice periods and the 6-month minimum, unless there's extenuating circumstances and having issues with rent arrears and things. So the Coronavirus Act.
Has that been done away with now? There's the Coronavirus Act done away with that 6-month notice period?
Yes, that's done away with now, and we've reverted back to the original, obviously, notice periods with the PRT. There is some changes to it, but generally it is back to the way it was pre-COVID.
So give me an idea about what it was before and what it is now?
Well, private residential tenancies aren't a fixed term contract anymore like the short assured. As an ongoing rolling contract, the tenant is only obligated to give 28 days notice at any point in time throughout the tenancy. Depending on the grounds for eviction, then there's different obviously periods, but generally you are, I think rule of thumb, 3 months. But in the first 6-month period of a tenancy with the private residential tenancy, depending on the circumstances, you are, as the landlord or the agent on the landlord's behalf, entitled to give 28 days to the tenant as well.
Yeah.
But obviously it has to be under the right circumstances, and it depends on the grounds of doing that and things. But that is a lot better than basically 6 months across the board, practically, as it was during COVID. Obviously, antisocial and things was the exception, but you have to obviously be able to prove antisocial and things, and that's quite difficult. So
antisocial behaviour is a huge minefield to try and prove, isn't it? You've got to go through a huge rigmarole to do that, and often people are actually not able to do that because they don't want to. They don't want to get into that conflict with the people round about them. So it's difficult to actually gather that evidence, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, that's the shortest notice period you could serve on a tenancy, but you need the evidence to back it up. You need to have a record of obviously any antisocial behaviour that's went on in the property, or obviously reports from neighbours or the tenant themselves. Do you know what I mean? There needs to be a lot of evidence compiled to do that. And it needs to be done.
Do you think with the Coronavirus Act and the fact that it's been 6 months, do you think inflation and the fact that utility bills are going up so high, and they're probably due to go up again in October, do you think this will have an impact on the rental market? And what's your opinion on maybe the government might actually end up stepping in again?
Yeah, I do think it will have an impact. It has a big impact on people's affordability. We've already started to see potential new tenants or tenants who are looking to rent property. It's a big part of their decision-making process when it comes to obviously their obviously what they can afford and their expenditure and things, taking into consideration rent plus these increased bills on top of that. And I do think that, as they done with Coronavirus Act, when COVID hit and obviously the impact it had on lettings, they're going to look at this, especially like you see the hike further down the line this year. They're going to look at it again and think, right, we're going to need to step in again. And there will be some changes, I think, further down the line, possibly later this year. That might be something similar to what we had to obviously contend with through lockdown and things and the coronavirus period. But what that is, I can't confirm. We'll have to
from an investment point of view, if you're investing in property, you really need to do your numbers and de-risk. And we'll talk about de-risking, and I'll talk about making sure you do risk analysis, which is more. I mean, somebody actually commented on my TikTok. You know, I'd been mentioning a TikTok. It's up to about 50,000 views so far. So it was about financing and about how to get the cheapest financing possible, which is from your house. And there was people mentioning certain things, and they were going back and forward, and they're going, "How's that possible?" But also the fact is, one person says, "I don't get it. You know, why would you do this?" And then I actually talked about de-risking. Why would you want to charge the highest rent to make sure you get the highest return from a property if you can get a reasonable return and just buy a normal property? It's like, well, you want to make sure you get the highest margin, not the highest rent technically, the highest margin, because the highest rent could end up costing you the most money in terms of what you need to buy to get that rent. So it's the highest margin that you make, and the margin is different between the rent and the costs. So in other words, your bottom line profit. The highest margin possible, so you can cover yourself for any swings in occupancy rate, and any swings in rent level, and any swings in interest rates. So if there's any movements in these in an adverse way, then you're obviously de-risking it. And as I said before, and this is what I said to the person, but you know, it's a common practice. Most investment houses do probability risk analysis. In order to make sure to mitigate the circumstances and anything that could happen. That's really what it's coming down to. I've got a comment from James here. He says Shelter are pushing to still have notice period revert back to COVID levels. Yeah, there's a surprise.
That doesn't surprise me. I was just about to say that. And I tell
you what, the only agency it takes in millions and millions and millions and 100 millions of pounds, you know, and they've never built one house in their life. So what does that say? To be honest, I don't think that's any credence at all. I kind of think there's a lot of people actually getting paid to push paper around, and it's not. When they worked out, I think it was Kate Faulkner, which is very, very detailed in analysis and the rest. That Kate Faulkner actually said that Shelter actually protected 2,000 people last year. Wow. Hundreds of millions of pounds to actually keep 2,000 people in their houses. It's like, oh my God, you could have just moved them to another house for that value and got rid of Shelter completely.
Yeah. Well, that's surprising. I didn't know that.
The timescales do you think that would take?
Sorry?
What sort of timescales do you think that would actually be if anything was to happen?
Oh, for them to reintroduce this kind of level, I mean, how long's a piece of string? But as I say, I think as this year progresses and we come into another hit with inflation costs and things, then it's definitely going to be on their agenda to put some sort of measures in place. And I do think they'll try and work, I mean, not to panic anybody, but the 6-month notice period, I think it will get worked back into legislation one way or another. Potentially,
Possibly, yeah.
there's a
I
risk
see
of
that
that.
maybe being the case that that could happen. But again,
That's-
we come back to saying that if you've forecasted for that and you have mitigated your circumstances for that, then you know why would you need to worry about it? Because
Yeah.
it's worked pretty well just now, hasn't it? I mean, I hate to say that. I hate to say that publicly because the First Minister might be watching, and then she'll go, "Oh, let's put it back, Patrick Harvey. Hope you're not watching."
I do feel as a letting agent and a managing agent and things, from our perspective, there's been one or two cases where it's had a bit of detrimental effect, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not been that bad. Although I have heard some horror stories from people that, but then whether I don't know the validity of them.
This is where I'm saying this is about spreading your risk and what I talk about how you should be involved in big portfolios.
Yeah.
Because if you've only got one property, this is why I'm a big fan of portfolio management. If you're involved in one property, then all your eggs in one basket. That's really what it comes down to. If anything happens with that one property, you've had it. Your income's done. If you've got multiple properties you're investing across, then clearly your risk has been spread straight away, because if one property goes down, the rest of the properties pay for it, and you don't need to worry as much. So I'm a big fan of multiple property in terms of doing it. One or two units is no use at all, really, in the scope of things. You're probably better doing it out of a lot of properties. Hence the reason why we're growing the property investment fund. We're doing, and we'll be inviting people, if not now, if anybody's interested in that, you can come in and message me direct now, and I could go over it with you. We can invite people now if they want to invest in this property investment fund that we are growing, because we've bought our first property. We're going to be buying more property into that. And it's literally, you're going to be in business with me. And guess what? I am taking all the risk. That's what I'm putting. My name's going in the dotted line. That's what it's down to. So this is going to succeed whether I like it or not, because it's all based on what I've learned before for the last 30 years. And that's how I'm going to build it as a result. Why would I need to do that? Well, it's, basically making money on the money. That's really what it comes down to. I help people make money. I make money as well. And everybody else makes money. And that's what we want to do. One person says to me, "Oh, money." This is the urban myth. Money is the root of all evil. It's like, and that's what it says in the Bible. Oh no, it doesn't. It's the love of money, not money. It's the love of money is the root of all evil.
Which makes a lot more sense.
Is the root of all evil. So just get your facts right when you chuck that statement out. That's one of the urban myths, isn't it? Straight away, money is the root of all evil. Well, it's not, because the whole world uses money as an exchange, of a transactional exchange, in order to make sure everything's fair based on what we exchange goods and services for money itself. So unless you have money, guess what? You're not doing it. Now, I've worked without money before, and I've worked with plenty of money before, and I tell you what, having plenty of money is a lot better than without it.
Yeah.
So that's that urban myth put to bed. So, anything else in the news we need to know about before we move on?
I think that was the main thing for me to discuss today. Obviously, the notice period thing's quite important at the moment. But I think, like you say, the risk analysis factor. Don't get too worried about scenarios like this. If you've done your risk analysis, like you say, if you've factored in the periods where you're maybe going to be not have rent, or interest rates are going to be higher, if you've got contingency and risk analysis in place where you're going to be fine in these situations, you don't need to worry. And the bigger your portfolio,
from the neggies on TikTok about what happens when the property crash comes, and it's like, okay, and it's completely irrelevant, the property crash, if you're keeping your property, because it doesn't make any difference. It's for us, it's all about the rent coming in. Mm-hmm. The one thing it could affect things right now is inflationary pressure, because I have now begun to see people actually moving in together. And therefore, we did have one. My long term, Arthur, we've lost you.
I know.
Arthur's been with me for over 20 years. I mean, he's been a fantastic tenant, and we've looked after him very well. And I'm really a heartfelt thanks to Arthur. because he's been brilliant.
Yeah.
And Arthur's decided to move in with his girlfriend because it makes absolute sense.
Just makes sense. I
I've
know.
got a similar situation. Tony as well. They're considering moving it together because it's the cost involved in running two houses. It makes no economic sense now. So it's actually pushing people to that point. So that's probably something we'll have to watch out for. But there's still a huge amount of demand for rentals, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah. I mean, the amount of inquiries coming through for rental property and demand is still as busy as it was at the beginning of the year. Maybe slightly dropped just ever so slightly because we've got rid of that initial. Obviously, the start of the year was just crazy, but we've still very, very high demand in rentals.
Yeah, say a quick hello to Roy. Hi, Roy, how are you?
Hi, Roy.
Roy's actually absolutely fantastic. Roy's been running, as far as I'm aware. I wasn't able to go. Was open night for investors and landlords at the Laurel Bank. And that, Roy, if you can tell us how that went, that'd be absolutely fantastic. So, Roy, you got any questions? Please feel free to ask them. One of the other things I got in when I was talking to the Bank of Scotland. So I'm talking. I've been talking to the. Finally, I've got that money off. I've finally got it over the line. You know yourself, Richard. That's been a huge burden. But when you think about it, it is 1.3 million. So they're kind of going to do a lot of due diligence on this. But finally, it's over the line. I've got that, and I'm now away to buy again. And I've been buying all the time anyway, and I've got stuff in the pipeline. But the one thing, when I spoke to the corporate division of the Bank of England, Bank of Scotland, they actually told me that interest rates are not going to go up as far as they're concerned in terms of base rates as much as they predicted at the beginning of the year. Because they believe that the inflationary pressure with the war in Ukraine, with the restriction of goods and services, and because of everything that's going on round about, they believe that it might not be as dramatic as they actually thought in the first place, which is a sigh of relief to a degree if your mortgage is based on possibly the interest rates. Amazingly, though, there's a lot of people still on variable rate mortgages, and you should be taking advantage of that, shouldn't they? I mean, we did that show. Remember, it was like 11,000 people in Fife. It's like, what? Who sits on a variable rate mortgage? I mean, some people don't have a choice because of their circumstances. They might not be able to do anything about it. But there's surely people out there right now that could be changing their mortgage onto a lower rate. And this is all about, again, we're not talking about wealth creation as in let's make lots of money, but also let's save some money as well. And if you've got 11,000 people just in Fife, how many does that extrapolate right across to Scotland and across the UK, where a lot of people are actually sitting on almost double the interest rates of what they could have, what they're paying just now. And when you think about it, if you could fix for 2 or 5 years, you'd save yourself an absolute fortune. I mean, it's something like £2,000 a year. It's about £2,000 a year in Fife for the average person. Now, I'll be honest, folk, just let that go by. But if I was to walk up to you right now and take £2,000 out of your pocket, you'd go, hey, there'd be a mass fight, wouldn't there? And yet, there's people out there just letting that happen. So shop around, guys. If you're on a variable rate mortgage, for goodness sake, look at the valuation of your property. Speak to a mortgage broker and see if you can actually do something about that. Even saving £2,000 a year, and people go, oh, but a mortgage broker's £500. It's like, okay, but you're going to save £2,000 a year, and it's going to cost you £500 to do it. That's a 3-month payback. Hello.
I think as well. I think a lot of people maybe aren't in the knowledge to know that they can go and shop around and get better deals and things, and they just idly sit, and or like you say, obviously paying an extra up to possibly even £2,000 a year without even the knowledge of the fact that it's quite simple to go and obviously rectify it. But
this is quite a good one, because James actually leads me onto this perfect when he says that. This is one of the things I want to talk about. I say sorry for the keep leverage at 75%. It could mean trouble as rates climb, and so does inflation. Bank of England simply pumped too much cheap money into the system. Absolutely. Warren Buffett says that all the time. When you pump so much money into the system, you've got to think about, and what happens next. So what the key out of this is, the classic example is, if you keep leveraging yourself up every single time, and everybody talks about this, and this is one of the myths, tax-free money. It's bullshit. It's not tax-free money, lending it from the bank, because at some point you will pay the piper, and I'll guarantee you, but even worse, you might actually get caught in the negative equity trap. So remortgaging all the time maybe gives you a short-term gain in terms of, oh, we're no taxed on it at that point in time. But the reality is you're going to pay the piper later on. I'll give you a classic example. And I'm going to talk about this openly.
I was just going to say, because
I've got 1 or 2 properties like that. You know yourself.
Yeah.
So I bought a property, a few properties, around about the 15,000, 10,000 mark in the early 2000s. Okay. Now, that is 15,000, for example. So let's maybe actually stick that on a spreadsheet. Maybe open my spreadsheet and let's get on that. I love a good spreadsheet. And then we could see that. And we could see where these numbers lie and see if I could share this on the screen. Let's see if I could share so everybody can see what I'm talking about. Good spreadsheet here. See that okay?
Saying, yep.
See if I could zoom in on that actually. Can I zoom in on that? Oh, I need to close that down again. I'll need to open another one. It's playing funny with me. Here we go. And get that one. Can you see that one okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it this time. Okay, zoom in.
Yes.
That's because I typed something in there. Okay. So I bought a property for 15,000 in 2003. Okay. Now, what I did immediately, when it got to about 2006, it was then worth about 60 grand. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, I then had the mortgage at that time. The mortgage was, I think it was probably about 12 grand, to be honest. Okay, so 60 grand, and then I got a 75% out of there, times, I think it was 80 at that time. So I got 48,000 out, okay? So I've got a 48,000 mortgage now. 48,000. Now, it was great because one thing you shouldn't do is you shouldn't run out and spend that money on something that doesn't make you more money. So luckily enough, I then reinvested it and bought more property. So that's fine, that still makes money. But the key here is in 2003, when I took that out, it's going to end in 2033. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll end. Now, today, the valuation of that property, the valuation in 2006 was 60 grand. The valuation of that property today, any predictions, Richard? What would you think? Maybe 120 or something like that, you reckon?
Well, I know roughly what property it is. So
You would normally think it would be, oh, that'll go up about 4 times in value. So you know, in 2006 it was that, so it's bound to be a lot more. The value of that property today is 50 grand.
Yeah. Well, it was hard for me to do that because I know what.
I know. So there you go. So if I sold it tomorrow, I would be out. I would be cleaning my feet if I sold it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But what you don't realise here is the capital gain. The capital gain is plus the 50 grand I just sold it for, minus 15 grand I bought it for, plus incidentals. Okay? I'm going to get my 12,500 allowance, because that's what you get for capital gains. So minus that and minus that. And then it's going to leave me a 22,000 gain. Now, if I'm a higher rate taxpayer, I'll pay times 0.28. But I'll be due £6,300. But wait a minute. I've just got out with selling it for 50 and clearing my feet. So in order to sell that property, I'm going to have to find £6,300 to pay off the capital gain, the tax.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the rubbish and the bullshit that people tell themselves about the fact that I keep remortgaging. You have to make sure you're remortgaging a property that potentially will go up enough, or you will never ever sell. But I'm going to be forced to do something about that when it comes to, guess what, 2033, because that mortgage will now be up, and the bank will come back cap in hand and say, by the way, I'm wanting my 48 grand back.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that's quite a clear way of doing that, and I think a lot of people don't understand. That's like you say, obviously, you just automatically think, well, it's going to go up in value, but we know that.
So be careful, because if you have a property crash and you're intending to exit, now I've got no intention of exiting, so I will just wait till 2033 and I'll make sure I've got a provision in place in order to mitigate this at that point in time. But if you are a person who is very nervous and you're risk adverse and you need to exit at a certain point in time, and you want that choice of being able to exit at any point in time, then you shouldn't be doing this sort of strategy. You shouldn't be remortgaging all the time, every time, unless you're making sure you're going to be covered for anything like this that could happen. I mean, this is probably the worst case scenario you'll ever see in property investment in terms of how it could go. But I am trying to emphasize this because there's been a lot of people, and I know people right now, I know a landlord that's got about 40 or 50 properties like this in this situation, that he can't afford to then, because what's happened, and I'll just explain to this. Now, we've all seen that. So what's happened is he can't afford to sell his properties to his limited company because they're all in his name. So he's got them all in this situation like that, all borderline, where he's remortgaged the whole lot up to that point. From the early 2000s, because of the credit crunch and, values went up, he remortgaged them all out, and they've all been, they're all good money in there. So I'll call them cash cows. But what's happened is he's remortgaged the whole lot up. The value has not gone to that right value that, in order to mitigate this capital gain, it potentially might come out. And therefore, he's stuck in a situation. He's got the interest deductions now against his higher rate, because he's a high rate payer. Because he's locked himself into it, because he's maybe earning what would be possibly, he's maybe having to pay £70,000 in interest. So he's having to pay £70,000 in interest. But in order to pay £70,000 in interest, you have to make £70,000 at least, just to break even. So
which would be difficult.
You're taxed on the 70 grand. So if you're taxed on 70 grand, some of that's going to be higher rate. So therefore, when you get the £70,000 in interest get taken off at lower rate, because that's what happens now, it doesn't get taken off the amount that you're making, you end up having a differential there. So you're having to pay tax and make no money at all. And he can't afford to sell these properties to his limited company because he doesn't have the means to have a mortgage at the limited company side. And all the banks will say, well, we're basically wanting you to now clear your mortgages with us. And it's like, well, you can't do that. Plus the fact he's got the 4% ADS he's got to pay as well. So he's really got himself into a position.
I was just going to say, that's a really bad situation.
Yeah, a lot of landlords have got themselves into that position. So what I had done in the beginning, to mitigate that was half of my portfolio was on capital repayment and half of my portfolio was on interest only. And that's how I've managed to sail through this and make sure I've been protected as a result. So that's the way you should be doing it. You should be making sure you've got that risk. So don't fall for this when people come on and say about tax-free money and taking money out of your all the time. It's not the way you should be doing it. It's very, very risky for the tax-free money. So there's the first urban myth, I would say. Probably the other classic example in urban myth is there's a guy going on TikTok now, and he's running about saying he's made £52,000 on his house.
We've both seen this. We've both seen this, Jim. Yeah.
I think there's other people maybe seen that out there as well. So he talked about it and he said, look, and I'll show you again. I'll clear these numbers and I'll just jump onto this and show you what he's done. So what he's done here is he's gone into this and he's gone, I tell you what, I bought this house recently and he bought it for maybe, I don't know, maybe 120 grand. Okay. And so he's bought it for 120 grand. Ignore all these other figures. Let's get rid of all this rubbish now. He's bought it for 120 grand. He spent on refurb. So he spent about 40 grand on refurb. He spent 40 grand on refurb. And he's now 160 in, plus that one. Okay. So he's now 160 in. But he said he's now got a valuation. That's my butter fingers there, or my big fingers. He's now got a valuation of 210.
The numbers we're concentrating on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then minus that. So he said he's made himself. I've made 50 grand. And my first question is, what do you mean you've made it? So you've sold it then. So you made, because if you're going to make 52 grand, surely you have to realise it and sell it.
Yeah.
No. I've not sold it. You've not made anything. Because all you need to have is a crash next year and you've not made 50 grand at all.
Yeah, so unless he physically sells it and gets that money out, but remortgaging it and taking it out, then, like you say,
Possibly, but then I go back to what I said in my urban myth before, is the fact that this tax-free money situation is not what you should be doing. It's very, very risky in terms of where you're going. And plus the fact that HMRC says that you've got to make sure that you reinvest the money back in existing property. You can't take that out and use it for your own sense, or they'll not give you a deduction on it because it's for your own personal use. So when you take money out of your buy-to-let property, it has to be reinvested in your business. It can't be then taken to go and buy yourself a new car. So that is not tax-free money you can get, because effectively when you take it out, that's income. So that's subject to income tax, it's subject to capital gain, it's subject to national insurance possibly, at the lower rate because you'll be self-employed in that capacity possibly. Or if you're a limited company, you can maybe take it out in dividends, but then again, it'll be taxed. So there's all different ways that you can do that. But then if you take out in dividends, there's rules again. It says, wait a minute, where did you get that money? And then the taxman will go, well, you're not allowed an interest, you're not allowed a deduction against it, because the money you've just taken out isn't relevant to what you've just done. It's income, and you've not produced enough income to do that. You've only borrowed it out of the company. So you've borrowed it now. So then you're subject to possibly even more taxation, because there's rules in place for borrowing money from your limited company if you don't pay it back within a certain period of time. So there's all these different things about these urban myths that people go on about, and it's just not true. So be careful for all these urban myths about the fact about the tax-free money, and just as you said about this thing about the 52,000. Oh yeah, I've made it. Plus the fact as well, he's going to have a capital gain. So he's going to have a deferred capital gain, because if you've got a valuation of 210,000, all you're doing is deferring the capital gain.
So Jim, so obviously, I mean, I think if you're treating your portfolio like a business, and it is just good business sense to be reinvesting that money that you're obviously, if you're remortgaging, then let's say obviously in this scenario they're looking at it as, oh, it's tax-free money and I'll use it for my own obviously whatever. So if they go and use that, then is there any kind of ramifications for them using the money in that kind of way?
If you use it for your existing business to put back into doing the same thing, then no, there's no implications for that.
No, that's fine.
If you use it for anything other than that, you'll get nailed to the wall. Literally, because that's not what it's for. So what? Because you're not making anything out of it then, and they're not getting anything out of it. As a result, all they're doing is you're getting a deduction, and they'll not allow you to get a deduction. There's case law in place for that. And you know, if anybody wants to know that, I'm more than happy to tell them about the case law. But then your deferred gain is there again. See that, because then you've spent that on it. You've done that, and then minus that. So you've got a gain there at 50 grand anyway. So you've got your 50 grand gain in that scenario. And then, so you've got a deferred gain there, which is your 12.5 off. Now, if you're a limited company, you don't have that taxation. See that? You don't have that allowance. So your gain, but then your tax will be taxed at lower rate corporation tax, which I think is 19% now. Don't quote me now. It could be 20%. I can't remember. Usually, I've got to the point where I just get an accountant to do now. So you have a 10 grand deferred gain there. If you put your 12.5 there, because it's maybe in your own name, you've still got a deferred gain there. So your 7.5 will be there at some point in time when you sell it in the future, if you sell it for that value. So it's you've still got to watch out for things like that. So saying it's tax-free money in that is pretty naive, and it genuinely does show the naivety of the people actually on there saying that, literally on that. See, there you go. James is actually saying 19% rising to 25%, depending on the company size. I think it's based on turnover, James. Anything up to 250,000 or maybe 150,000 or something to that effect. Because I think I'm going to fall into that now, because my turnover is now moving up to that higher level in my limited company, because I'm buying more property for my portfolios. So I'll have to, and I kind of thought about splitting it up into different companies and all the rest of it. It's like, by the time you try and work that out, and the tax you're going to be due, and splitting up in a different company, and the rigmarole you'll have to go through with paying accountants fees, with having due diligence for your returns and everything like that, and it's like, it's not worth it. You're just wasting your money. You know what I mean about the time involved and the amount of companies that you're actually running now. When I go on sometimes and I look at other people's accounts, and I look at the number of companies that are running in the background. There's about 13 different companies they've got. I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's about £13,000 in accountants' fees every year just to do your returns. That's
doesn't make sense.
I mean, well, obviously you're a bit less than that, but still, and even if you had it all in one company, then it might actually be more cost effective to have it like that. But then again, it's down to personal circumstances about, do you have to have that in a separate company because you've got securities from the lender and they won't allow any other property or any other business involved in that. I came across that with Aldermore, for example. Aldermore wouldn't lend to my other company because I had ownership of subsidiary companies in that, and I had ownership of commercial properties in that. So Aldermore wouldn't entertain me. They insisted that I set up a separate company and it has to only do buy to let, and then they'll entertain anything I bought in that. So that's another thing you have to work through in terms of what you're going to do that. So that's where we are right now. And hopefully that's given everybody a bit of food for thought. Let's talk about some of the urban myths that are coming through. Actually, I put a wee thing about fake news. Did you see that post?
I did
the week. Michelle actually says, and I know it's no along the lines of fake news and that. She says, dreamers never achieve anything. And I kind of think, I get the gist of what she means by that. Because I used to get my report card every single time at primary. Oh, he's a dreamer. He just looks out the window all the time.
Daydreaming.
Aye, daydreaming. And now I could go back to my teacher and say, oh, thanks very much. That's quite a compliment. Because as Michelle knows, the dreamers are the only ones that have the imagination to create things which actually develop into things that we will use in innovation in order to move forward. And as a result, everybody prospers and they prosper as well. Is Elon Musk a dreamer? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is Jeff Bezos a dreamer? Absolutely. Is Richard Branson a dreamer? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, it's the dreamers that will be the achievers in the world. So thank you, Michelle, for putting that on. Another one.
Dream big. Yeah.
So Irene actually said, well, what's the first thing that happens when you start something new? You always get somebody that comes in and says, you'll never be able to do that.
There's always going to be somebody that will rain on your parade, definitely.
I'm glad you adopted that phrase.
Yeah. There will be though, and I've experienced it, and I've seen it happen to a lot of people, and a lot of people could take it quite personally, and it will hold them back and stop them from achieving what they've set out to do. And you really need to cut out all the white noise and concentrate on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, she says, "Oh yeah, well, I have achieved it, and more." So well done, Irene. That's absolutely fantastic. Scott Harwood, is it Scott Harwood or Haywood from Coffee House and Candy Queen?
It's Harwood, I think, yeah.
Aye, so
yeah, the coffee shop. Yeah.
There's no point in opening. This is what he got told. There's no point in opening in a small town because you'll be bankrupt in a month.
Yeah, I read his comment and I love the response. I'll let you do it. So.
And that's the reality of that is, well, he's got almost 2 years that he's still going, and he's still going strong, and he's opened Candy Queen round the corner.
He's opened another one.
So it's the bullshit people tell you, isn't it? It's and people out there think they're trying to protect you, but some people aren't trying to protect you at all. What they're trying to do is keep you right where you are, because you threaten their circumstances. In other words, you make them look bad because you're succeeding. They're not succeeding, so their excuses are no longer valid anymore because they maybe wanted to open in the small town as well, and what they told themselves. This is the story you tell yourself. What they told themselves every single day is there's no market for what it is, and I'll be bankrupt in a month. So they want to tell everybody else that because they want to keep everybody else exactly where they are, so we can all have this pity party together. That's another urban myth. So thanks for that, Scott. Jamie actually jumped in and says. One of the ones that everybody build it and they'll come.
Yeah.
Is that no Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner?
I think it will.
It's true though, eh? It's true though. People actually say that, build it and they'll come. I mean, that is an urban myth. Build it and they'll not come. You have to make sure you do your market research, and you have to make sure you've got a good footfall for that, and you have to make sure you've got an actual market for it, for what you're actually trying to do. So,
you need to have a good business plan and have a strategy and think, right, okay, this is going to work because I could see all these factors are going to obviously make it work.
The great one for me was a typical example of that is build it and they will come. And you'll not remember this, Richard, is back in the 1970s when you had British Leyland. So British Leyland was Rover, it was Triumph, it was all these different companies all amalgamated into British Leyland. And it was a government-owned car maker. And what they had done was British Leyland were producing cars that they wanted to produce, not what the public wanted. They just wanted to produce the car. So let's produce this car and then we'll see if we can sell it. And what had happened was when the Conservative government came in the end of the 1970s and into the early 80s, they then said, no. It should be, what does the consumer want? And then we'll go and make it. So that's what changed the whole landscape. Now, the political, yeah, absolutely. Don't mention the winter of discontent. When interest rates were 19% and inflation was 25%, something like that. That was a time where nothing was happening. They wouldn't even collect the bins. All the refuse and rubbish was up in the streets and everything. But build it and they'll come. That's a classic example of how the mentality in the 1970s was. We'll produce something and we'll see if somebody will buy it. If they didn't buy it, we'll have to scrap it. But hey ho. But the other accountancy trick at that time was if we build it for stock, what happens is it gets taken out of the profits. So it actually makes the profits look inflated, even though the item's sitting in stock. And it's only if you can't sell it and you have to write it off as it affects your profits. So what they were doing was they were building for stock all the time, making it look like they were making an absolute fortune on the bottom line. And in actual fact, they weren't at all. They were just building stuff, putting it in stock. And then eventually it came to a write-off and it was hundreds of millions of pounds. That's another one, build it, it will come. Probably the ones, money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah, we spoke about this last week, this one.
I got a cut across the ear from my dad when I said that. my dad says money doesn't grow on trees. And I went, well, money is paper and paper is produced from trees of pulp. And this was about 6 or 7 year old. And so why does money not grow on trees, Dad? And he wasn't chuffed. But it's true, though. Money does grow on trees. Because effectively, when you think about it, you've got orchards and you've got oranges, you've got apples, you've got everything like that. Does that no then get sold to produce money? So when people say money doesn't grow on trees, it does, literally.
I think as well, if you look at it, look at your, for instance, a buy-to-let portfolio. Look at all the different branches of your portfolio, all your different properties as a metaphoric tree. And do you know what I mean? Then money does grow on trees. If you could create that.
Yeah, David actually says it quite good. Small minds have limiting self-belief barriers, and then pass those barriers on to those that will listen. Absolutely, Dave, you've hit it on the nail.
Yeah.
It's the case that people just don't want for you to be as good as them, and it highlights their failures. That's how I see it. If anybody else thinks differently, please feel free to comment. Yeah. But you'll probably be broke. I'll tell you that. Now you can think at this point is what an arrogant prick that guy is. Tell me something that I didn't ken. Honestly, tell me something that I don't know. I even think that about myself sometimes. But I tell you what, unless you have a good self-image of yourself, you'll never have a good self-image of other people as well. That has to be key here. You have to love yourself first, literally, before you can love other people. And it is and you can see that with every successful relationship where people actually have a great relationship is because they have a good self-confidence in themselves, and they have that in themselves. They can see it in others, and it's when people don't have that in themselves, that's when relationships break down, because mistrust and deception all creep in as a result of that.
Yeah, I think a big part of success, obviously, is your self-confidence, and you need an element of arrogance for that as well. Definitely.
You have to. I mean, sometimes it comes across as arrogance. Sometimes it comes across as self-belief. Sometimes it comes across. It just depends who's actually watching and who's listening and engaging. Mm-hmm. And it's what you think about that is to yourself. That it's all, again, it's down to your own personal perception and how you were brought up. Probably the final one for me is you can't have your cake and eat it. Why not? I could never get over that one. I've got my cake, and I'm going to eat it. That's another one I've got a clout across the ear for. That's probably why I've got no hair left.
But then I would agree with you there. It's quite a strange one to think. You can't have your cake and eat. I'm trying to put that in perspective. Well, how could you not? How could you not have your cake and eat it as well?
It's something that we used to tell ourselves every single time. I used to get told to me every single time. You know, and the other limiting beliefs is the classic example of that is that's no for the likes of us. Sorry, what do you mean it's no for the likes of us? I get really annoyed when I hear people saying that, especially
automatically categorise yourself.
It makes the person saying it feel comfortable about where they are.
Yeah.
But what they don't realise is they're stealing somebody else's dream. So effectively, if you're saying that, you're a dream stealer. That's what you are. You're stealing people's dreams. That's all you're doing. So in future, if I hear anybody saying that, I'm going to call you out and call you a dream stealer. That's it, in a nutshell. And nobody wants to be a dream stealer, but clearly that's the point here. So these are all the urban myths. There's loads and loads of more urban myths. You would know. That's no for the likes of us. Don't get ideas above your station. Jeez. That's another one as well. Why not? Yeah. Why not? Why not? We want you to get ideas above your station because that's innovation. Do you think Elon Musk didn't?
It's the whole dreaming big thing.
Ideas above his station. You know, when he comes on and says all these things about what he's going to do in the future, how he's going to colonize Mars and that, you know, you could hear people probably saying, "Oh, don't get ideas above your station." It's like, you know, but these people, again, I'll genuinely say they're probably broke. And they've probably not got a great relationship with themselves or anybody else around about them. And I hate to say it. There's a phrase that applies to that, and it's called "pigs don't know, pigs stink." You ever heard that? Pigs don't know, pigs stink.
Yeah.
The reality is that's the reality. You may all think you're in this, but you don't know it's you. If you're the person saying it and nobody else is listening to it, it's probably you.
Yeah.
What it comes down to. So that's the one for me. We're going to. You got anything else? You got ones that you've always been reminded when you were growing up, or anything like that? Anything you could think about?
Not that I can think offhand, but yeah, the ones that you've covered are quite. They're obviously quite common ones, which will resonate with everybody. But I do believe in the mindset that they put people in, or the mindset that people that use them are in, and how it can affect people that are trying to succeed and dream big. So basically, don't listen to them.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Oh, Joanna says it means you cannot keep your cake complete and eat it. Is the thought process?
That's the thought process, right? Okay.
I'm still not believing that, Joanna. I refuse to let that get into my mind. It's almost like you have to put an eggshell. Look, my head's like a shell. It's like this eggshell around your head and around your brain to protect you from the negative it gets in. So I call it an eggshell. You know, get an eggshell. Make sure you've got hardened and you can't let anybody else get in there. Don't let anybody else get into there unless you put good thoughts in there. Your brain's a computer at the end of the day. You put garbage in, you're probably going to get garbage out. You put good stuff in, you're going to get good stuff out. Maybe a wee bit of garbage in there as well. Maybe a bit of residue, but at least you're going to get better thoughts than anything else out there. So we're going to portfolios. Let's talk quickly about portfolios.
I was going to say we've got the portfolios to cover.
I'm going to go into my Aberdeen portfolio. Let's see if I can share screen. Geez. Some of these things are coming up and they're telling me certain stuff and don't save and jumping from place to place. That's the thing about doing this. I should just do what Cardone does and just get a whiteboard at the back of me and talk about portfolios. So here is, let's talk about the Nairn one.
Okay.
So this is
just outside Aberdeen.
This is the flats. I mean, these are all in a block. These are single lets. So been let since 2014, 2012. The price in there is, the rents every month is £7,915. The purchase price they're wanting for it is 1.77 million. They say it's an average yield of 5.38%. So let's see what we can do about that, because that then comes out to, when I'm looking at my numbers, I was looking at my numbers and I was dividing that down. And I was thinking to myself, okay, let's look at that then. That's coming down to an average rent of £440 thereabouts. per property for the 18 properties. Average price to buy £98,333. So we'll look at how that would work out. I mean, you could buy that for cash if you've got 1.7 million lying about. I don't think anybody would really have 1.7 million lying about. But if I can get my return on investment spreadsheet here and quickly jump in here, you see my return on investment? See that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so purchase price. We'll do 18 properties because it's important that you do 18 and not just one at 1.7 million just to do it, because we're wanting to work out occupancy rate and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
98. So this is my wee bit of due diligence. I'm going to show you how I do.
98,000.
That's the 1.7 million purchase price. 4% stamp duty. Well, there's no stamp duty. There's only an averaging. So the stamp duty is actually an average of the 18 properties. So let me just grab and tell you what the stamp duty. Instead of paying 71,000, which is the 4% on it, you're actually paying an average, which is the average of the total value. So the average of that is 71, 1, 2, 3, divided by 18. You're only paying around about 3,900. So you're only paying about 3,900 there. That's how much it is because it's divided by 18. Okay?
Yeah.
Because if you buy 6 or more properties over, what happens is they take the total stamp duty, divide it by the number of properties, the 4% ADS, and they give you the average amount. So that's 3,944 now.
Yeah, we touched on that last week, and a lot of people they're not aware of that. With the
So the average rent is 439.72. Okay? Now, that's where we are right now in terms of the rent, in terms of the value. Now, if and the mortgage and all the rest of it, and you can put 30% overhead, so you're making a 75 grand profit because you've got your 30% overheads in here. But your return on it, your net return's okay, your money down. Now, if you're not paying anything in that, you'll probably pay to purchase that. By the way, you'll have to get legal fees. So you're probably talking about £1,000 for each property. So you're probably talking about £18,000 in there to add on to that. And then it's already compliant because they're in place already. So over a 10-year period, based on that, you've got a 42% ROI, return on investment. See that?
Yeah.
Because that's basically that multiplied by 10. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if you leverage it? Say you went to Aldermore, for example, and did a 25% deposit. So you're putting 442 in. Your mortgage interest rate for them is probably around about 4.5. You get people that will do it a lot lower, to be honest. But that then gives you an idea. Arrangement fee for them will be 1% of the portfolio. So you're sitting again, it's no great, it's coming down. But you've got to think you've got capital appreciation. Okay, I better put 30% there, by the way. So it's not great at all. So it's probably an investment that I would actually maybe steer clear of unless you've got a lot of money to put in. And actually, you're not going to use a mortgage to do it. So I wouldn't be keen on it for me. But I tell you what, though, if you bought it outright and didn't put anything down on it, okay, you've got a good return. I mean, when did for somebody that's putting, maybe you've got a pension fund, it's 1.8 million, and you kind of think to yourself, I tell you what, I've got a bit of money lying about in my savings and investments and all the rest of it. You have to work out how much it's going to cash in. But I could still make £66,000, which is a 3.7% return. And then what I could do as well is I've still got the capital appreciation. So over the next 10 to 20 years, that could possibly double. And that's not taking the capex into account either. So if that went up to 3% every year, then you're bringing your return on investment up to 67%.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a quick ready reckoner about how I would look at that in terms of the numbers, where I would see it. Does that make sense to you, Richard?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Obviously, not everybody's going to be in that position where they've got money like that to put in and do a cash purchase. So, like you say, if it's going to be done through mortgage and that, maybe not the best.
No sourcing fee applicable at all for me. We don't do any sourcing fees.
Yeah.
For that. So that would be just a straight. I would pass you on the right people to contact and all the rest of it, and they'd do the business with you. So I'm not interested in sourcing fees. It's just about sharing the wealth. So portfolio in Aberdeen, the other one, we've got time. We have the portfolio in Aberdeen, the other one, and we'll talk about that. Let's close that one down. If you want more information on that portfolio, Nairn, by the way, because it could be a good deal. So don't write that off, because it depends on your circumstances and what you want. It could be a really good deal for you. I'm going to zero my spreadsheet out, so that all comes back to what.
I think with that one, like you say, you've got the cash to put in and think about appreciation. Then
let me just come back to saying I've done far too much here. Hide. Let's see if I can get this up. We've got a wee bit longer because we can cut the show at the beginning with the time that we're on for about 3 minutes, because we usually stick to an hour. So there's the portfolio in Aberdeen. So 40 properties. Now, I had my estimate. That's just 30%. Somebody actually made a pitch at 30% below the market value, and I thought, you're delusional. The vendor's looking at 4.4. We're thinking 3.8 or thereabouts. The rent's about 21,000 a month in terms of the rents coming in. So that's that one. Now, what I could do though is I'll then bring out the Ready Reckoner sheet, and then we'll jump onto that. Now, this one actually is pretty attractive. I've got to admit, I'll look through the numbers myself, and I did a wee Ready Reckoner on them. See the return on investment sheet, okay?
Yep.
Okay, let's look at numbers here. That's 40 properties. Average price that he wants is 111,625. The average price that we think is probably about 95,000. The average rent is 521.25. So we're going to plug that in. We're going to plug in the average purchase price. We'll just put it in at his, what he's wanting.
Yeah.
And 4%. They have the sorry, I should put 40 in there.
40, I was going to say it's not just 40.
Your deposit 25%. Well, actually, no, just do it like that, and just do it like that. Rental is 521.25 every month. So see that comes in at an income for 4.6 million invested. Now again, legals. So you probably have about 40 grand in legals. We'll just put that aside at the same time. So you're about 4.7 million in, but you're getting an income of round about 175 after somebody's managing it all for you anyway and building in overheads. Now, that management fee could actually be a bit less, and your repairs could be a bit less, but this is ready to go. This isn't actually, we've got to fill all your properties. This is actually money coming in from day one. So effectively, if you were able to shave your overheads down to 25%, you're sitting at 187. Now, 187,000. I know what pension funds are paying out right now in your pension fund, and they're not paying out anything like that every single year. So, you've got to balance up whether it makes sense for you or not. But I tell you what as well, I'll move that back to 30% and I'll show you here. So we're looking at 25% down through a mortgage. We're looking at 4%, just say. Arrangement fee with the bank will be 1%. Now, that, again, the stamp duty comes down.
Stamp duty.
Guess what? £178,000 right down to 4,465.
Divided by 40,
Hey, that's amazing, eh?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And then you've got a 3% appreciation, I just say. Okay. So that's what we're looking at in terms of 3%. Now, this is where I look at the numbers, right? You've got a 40,000 net profit there. Okay. Now, you could probably get better rates than that, to be honest, depending on who you're going with. But look what happens if you just make a slight increase in rent. You've got 40,000 there you're making right now. You put it to 550 every month. You're only putting 20 quid on everybody's rent. You've got another 10 grand on your bottom line. Just by putting people's rent up 20 quid or 25 quid. Amazing, eh?
20 quid's not going to upset anybody, and that's a big increase.
Your occupancy rates, when you're coming, you take it down to 10 months, you're still making money. Take it down to 9 months, you're still making money, just breaking even. But then again, as I said, if you're putting rents up to 550, potentially you're not breaking. You're more than breaking even because you've got overhead at 30% again. If these overheads are going to come in less, then you're sitting at 40,000. You're sitting at 23,000. So there's a lot of scope to play about with that in terms of where you are, in terms of the numbers, and in terms of occupancy rates. 525. We'll put that back to just to make it simple.
And this is Jim.
What are you saying, Richard?
This is like what we spoke at the beginning about, obviously risk analysis. This is the point. This is where to do that.
Absolutely. If you put a bigger deposit down because you've got bigger deposit, then your income's going to be a lot more on the bottom line. So you're 86,000 if you're putting 50% in. So you're putting 2 million in. But more importantly, over the next 10 to 20 years, you're making another 2 million possibly. 2 or 3 million over the next 10 to 20 years on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, so the 3% only takes into capital appreciation at 1.3 million. But if you're doubling, that's going up probably every year. I mean, 5% over the next 10 years, then that is entirely possible over the next 20 years. Then, you know, your return on investment, 272%. Again, so it's like, I've now got 2.2 million. Tell you what, get a number of people together.
Get a number of people, people together and do that.
You all chip into that pot, open your own limited company, go straight to Aldermore or a lender like that, have your own limited company, you've all got a part share in it, and you all invest in this and buy the portfolio together and share in the wealth together.
Yeah, there's a lot of wealth in that to be distributed amongst several people, you know.
So that's the key. So it's not just about doing it yourself, it's about sharing with everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay? Makes sense. That's it, guys. If you want more information, please feel free to contact us direct. And until next week for the Wealth Creation Show, we'll be talking about deals again. We'll go talk about other things as well. If you've got anything you want to talk about, anything you want to learn about, please feel free to contact us, because we will have the answer to that, or we will find the answer to that for you for next week. Until next week, guys, it's bye-bye from him. Come on, bye-bye from him and bye-bye
from him.
Oh, I see you've done the wrong way.
No, I didn't. Oh, I did. It's because it's mirrored. It's mirrored. It's mirrored image.